Hi, my name's Ben Beaton. I'm here with Marley Moyer and Dr. Sarah Barrett. Dr. Sarah Barrett's going to be taking us on a journey through the Fitzgerald Biosphere today. She's the Threatened Flora Officer at DBCA, Department of Biodiversity Conservation and Attraction. So thank you very, very much for your time today, Sarah. We really, really do appreciate it.
You're welcome. Well, I mean, in the park alone, there's more than 1,700 species. There hasn't been a comprehensive survey done for a long time, so no doubt that figure has gone up. And I don't have the figure for the biosphere uh, as well as the park, but it's probably going to be in the order of at least 2,000 species, possibly, probably more. But it's got such a diverse range of habitats. You've got the quartzite ranges of the barrens. You've got large areas of sandplain with banksia shrublands, much of which is healthy, and with only small areas of Phytophthora dieback, so they're very valuable. You've got areas of spongylite and spongylite gorges with the Fitzgerald River running through, and the Hamersley River. And then you've got the granite, the old Yilgarn Plateau at the northern edge of the park. And you've got those granite habitats. So it's got such a range of habitats and consequently flora.
And
In a
obviously, what
nutshell.
we're aiming to do within this sculpture and the artwork, the field naturalist component, is tell those multiple stories and focusing on specific species, but nonetheless providing a broad overview of really what makes this place so precious. So you sent us a range of images and a list of species, and I've got the first one up now. What I was thinking we might do at this stage is focus in on a number of the species based on the photos that you sent us. Would you be able to take us through some of the images that you've shared with us?
Yes. So I selected flora that is endemic to the park and adjacent to the park, but these species are actually endemic just to the western side of the park. Um, so the first one here is a Calictasia, or also known as tinsel lily. It's not a very good photo. It's quite an old photo, but this one is called Calictasia caryi. It's named after a very well-known botanist from Western Australia called Greg Curie, who's collected thousands of plants. And these are buzz-pollinated flowers. So bees come along and they hover or buzz next to the stamens, and then the stamens shed the pollen through that process. And I just had a little note that the word Calictasia comes from Greek kalos, meaning beautiful, and ektasis, meaning development, alluding to the blue spreading perianth, or the petals. Um, so that occurs on the sand plain in sort of Banksia shrubland, in the central to the western part of the Fitzgerald River, and isn't known outside the park at this stage.
Incredible. So these species, obviously, some of them, be they minute or be they grand, as the one we're going to talk about now, they've been slowly evolving just in this place for a very, very long time.
Yeah, we don't know exactly how long some of these plants have been around for, but perhaps in the tens of millions they have been evolving. Um, so yes, Heike Victoria has to be included in anything to do with the Fitzgerald River because it's so iconic and so beautiful. It's hard to beat that foliage. Um, so the Heike Victoria does occur across the park, and into the biosphere area. So it occurs outside the park too. It's an iconic species. It's killed by fire and regenerates from seed. So it holds its seed in woody fruit on the plant and is vulnerable to too frequent fire. But also some of these species, when it's very long unburnt, then they can also start to collapse and senesce.
And these are not flowers, are they? Nathan McCoy pointed this out to me
Oh
many years
no,
ago.
no, they're
What are
variegated
they?
leaves, and yeah, we don't have many species with variegated foliage, certainly naturally. So yeah, it's fairly unique. So that's purely the foliage. The flowers are little cream flowers held inside those leaves, and the axils and the fruits, the woody fruits, are in the axil of the leaf also.
Yes, I
Yeah.
noticed that they're very tightly bound in there. It's actually difficult to find them because they're buried
Yes,
so deep down.
yes, and it's prickly enough. It's very beautiful, but it's pretty harsh foliage,
Do you have any
which of
theories on
course.
how such a dynamic species evolved? What's driving that? How did
Well, I wonder,
what starts something like
partially
this?
the nutrient poor soil, because that grows on those very white leached sandy soils, and perhaps because if you grow Hakea Victoria in better fertilized soil in a garden, tends not to develop such vibrant colors. So it needs full sun, and it probably needs the low nutrients to produce those colors. So it may be partly response to the environment it grows in.
Oh, certainly. I just wonder what's the driving. It is so unusual, and uh, and I'm mystified as to how does something like this get started. Sometimes you can look at a species, particularly some animals have defense mechanisms or carnivores or the like, and some elements of some plants, and you can kind of get a hypothesize on how something like that got started. What's the driving factors that would push evolution to bring into being something of that? But
Yeah,
this is
and
absolutely staggering.
there's obviously a lot of other Hakea species in the park, and they haven't gone down that path. So
No,
I should
but they're also
possibly
quite
know
dynamic.
more, but I don't. But I would think the pigmentation are partly there be chemicals or that respond to stress or
Mm.
that produce
So
some of the
is it
color. That would be my only thought.
so the possums, the honey possums and
It's
the pygmy
they love it,
possums, are
and
they
there's
the ones that fertilize this?
they may well do. And there is a student at Notre Dame doing a study at the moment, and they've certainly shown that you need the older plants to provide that habitat for birds and possums and insects. You know, it takes a while after fire till they get to an age where they provide good habitat for them. So they'd be pollinated by possums, but probably honey eaters too, I would have thought, or, you know, and birds.
So we've had a chat with Nathan McCoy, who was quite concerned about the frequency of the fire. So what 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 is what you're
Yeah,
indicating is that if these plants don't have an opportunity to get to a venerable age, then don't have the opportunity to offer that habitat to, say, the pygmy possums, honey possums, and the like. So that's quite a concern.
yes, there are areas that have had relatively short intervals in the park, but we don't have any hard evidence at the moment that they've declined. There is some sort of photographic evidence that in areas just outside the park they may have, but you know, it's a big park, and there haven't been very short fire intervals as has occurred perhaps in other areas on the south coast. It's not to say that may not happen with climate change and an increase in fire frequency. But my opinion at the moment is that they're relatively well concerned. And of course, they are fortunate too, in that the Hakeas aren't very susceptible to Phytophthora dieback, unlike many of the Banksias. So they do have that in their favor. So, I mean, and we hope to do more research looking at fire intervals and the effect on Hakea victoria.
That plant, how old do you think that would be? I have no idea how quickly or slowly they grow.
Oh gosh, I would have a date on the photo and I would be able to cross-reference the date of the fire. I would have thought that might be 15 years old, something in that order.
Oh
Yeah.
gosh, yes, because I would have thought, is it 3 years old?
Oh no,
That sort
no,
of
I would.
thing. That's right. Just gives me a rough idea. It's
Yeah.
very impressive that they need that much time to grow to that height.
Yeah, but there's probably other species that take longer, to be honest, that even than Hakea victoria. Yeah.
Now we're onto the
Oh, so
Hybertia.
a little Hybertia. This one is Hybertia Fitzgeraldensis, named after Fitzgerald, and it only occurs in the western Fitzgerald, on the quartzite hills and mountains. So quite a short range endemic. I think it's relatively abundant where it does grow. So it's on West Mount Barron and Mount Bland. And there's there's a lot of diversity in Hybertia in Western Australia, and a lot of unique species. And I'm not sure what else I can add, except I've had a Hybertia named after me, of which I'm very proud, but that one's in the Stirling range.
That's
Right.
wonderful.
Wonderful.
What's its name?
Its name is Hybertia barrettii.
Ah.
Yeah, and it's a very localized endemic. Yeah, only it grows on 2 mountains.
Wow. Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah. Mm.
And
So this is
next.
a more unusual species. This is a Lysanthe. So it's in the Heath family, the Ericaceae. So in the Northern Hemisphere, the heathers, they're in the Ericaceae, and you've got many in South Africa. And we've huge diversity in Western Australia. Many of them are the bearded heaths called leucopogons. But this is a group all on its own. And I think there's only 10 species of Lysanthe in Western Australia. So it gets these big, quite fleshy fruits. And this is only known from the biosphere in area, I suppose, is it north of Bremer or west of Bremer? Sorry, in sort of a sand on sort of limestone habitat. So it's very restricted and only known from an area probably about, I don't know, about 10K by 4K,
So if it's west of Bremer, is it still in the national park?
No, so this one doesn't occur in the
No.
national park. Yeah,
No.
so it's just,
No, that's what I thought.
even people often think, oh, you got a great big national park that'll have everything, but then you only have to go another 30 or so K, and then you hit another patch, and you get another endemic species.
Wow.
So where does it occur? Like, as in, is it on private land or
It's
is
mainly
it
on
on a mountain?
unallocated Crown land or UCL. Yes. So it's not actually conserved in a nature reserve or a national park, but
Wow.
sorry.
Wow. So
Yeah.
very important to be protecting these if that's the only place you're going to find them in the whole world.
Yes. So you can imagine with the high number of species we have. I mean, I've got 93 odd listed threatened flora that occur between, say, the Ravensthorpe Range and Denmark. But then this isn't even listed at this point in time, and it is one that I would look at nominating for listing as threatened. But there is so much flora, it is hard to keep on top of it all and to monitor it.
Yeah.
So this is another, this is a threatened flora, so it is listed as threatened. It's called Adenanthus ellipticus, and so referring to the foliage. And it does occur across the park only on the quartz site. So it's on the Barren Ranges, East Mount Barren, the centre of the park, and West Mount Barren. So, but only on those coastal quartzites. And it's, you can see it's got little red flowers. I'm not sure what else I wanted to say about Adenanthus. Yeah.
It's a Proteaceae family,
Yes,
isn't
sorry,
it?
yeah, obvious. It's in the Banksia family, and as such, it would be vulnerable to Phytophthora dieback. But fortunately, all of those mountain tops are still healthy and in good condition. It does seem to suffer quite a bit from drought stress where it occurs. It can grow on these very shallow quartzite pavements, so it may well be vulnerable to climate change. But this population I went to fairly recently near West Mount Barren, and it was looking quite healthy,
Okay.
which is good.
Close up.
Yes.
Yes, so and they're quite hard to collect seed from Adenanthus. The seed drops, so we have in the past collected seed, putting out sort of seed traps underneath the plants so that it lands on a wire mesh or fabric, and you can collect the seed that way. But yeah, they're quite difficult to collect seed from, and the flowering is often quite staggered.
So I've noticed there's two different leaf forms, or the
Well
apex of the leaf
spotted.
is different.
Yes, well spotted. Because in this particular location, it does appear to be hybridizing with the more common Adenanthus cuneatus. So Adenanthus is a silvery Adenanthus with that like toothed leaf. And there is some Adenanthus cuneatus near this, so it does seem to be hybridizing. And there are quite a few Adenanthus hybrids known. And it doesn't seem to be hybridizing in some of the other populations, but in this particular one, in the western end of side of the park, it does seem to be hybridizing.
Oh.
So
And the
on the
flower.
right, yeah, it's very pretty. The left is a pink melaleuca, and on the right is Verticordia helichrysantha. And this population is from a coastal area in the west side of the park, and it grows on spongilite soils. It's not endemic to the park, as it also occurs at Cape Riche, which is, I suppose, 100 kilometers back towards Albany, but again on the coast, on coastal spongilites.
So that's the ancient Eocene sea. That was once
Yes, that would
marine.
be, yes, the marine plain, and it would have been formed under the Eocene Sea.
Fascinating.
It's characterized with, it's got that long style and stigma. It's very pretty, like all verticordias. Verticordias are one of my favorites, and verticordia literally means turner of hearts. So I always like that translation.
I can see why it's your favorite. It's very
Yeah,
beautiful.
yes, there's so much variation in verticordias, and they're so spectacular when they flower. And they just perform these mass floral events. So very
Okay.
pretty. Oh, and that's me. And that's its coastal habitat. It's very wind prone. It's like a garden, just, everything's under a meter. Lots of Calatamnus, lots of Melaleucas and Kunzias. It's just very pretty. And I think that the pink there is Andersonia. And yeah, you see the ocean in the background. Not a bad place to grow.
No, even if you don't have eyes. Amazing.
So this is another threatened flora, Boronia clavata, which occurs in the Biosphere on the Bremer River, so just west of the park. And it's only known from the Bremer River. Again, it the Bremer River cuts through sponge-like cliffs on its way to Bremer Bay, and it occurs on the riverbanks below the cliffs. It is also quite unique in that we know a bit more about the pollination here. There's an entomologist called Andy Young who studied it, and he studies these tiny micro moths called heliozelid moths, which are really quite beautiful when you see them close up. They're all sorts of iridescent golds and silvers, very pretty. So this Baronia has its own unique pollinator moth, and he's come and gone various times of the year to collect it, and I think he's publishing a major paper on this group of moths soon. Interestingly, there is a Baronia in Cape Arid, but it's been split into a different subspecies. So this is subspecies clavata, and the one over in Cape Arid, I've forgotten what it's going to be called, but it's different. And I think it's also got its own, a different pollinator moth, is my understanding. And yes, so just restricted to scattered little patches on the Bremer River.
Incredible.
And that's just showing one growing there, I think, leaning over into the river.
Mm.
But yeah, oh, and that's just a pretty photo with Alleghine native hibiscus in front. But that's its habitat. Yeah, the sponge-like cliff. And another threatened flora called Kunzia ericifolia subspecies subulata. And it's only known from the western end of the Fitzgerald. Kunzia ericifolia itself is a common Kunzia that grows between, I think, Albany and Perth and around wetlands. But this subspecies is restricted to the quartzite. Gets little yellow pom-pom flowers, and I think probably bee pollinated.
It's amazing. So much endemism.
Yes. And we have a Eucalyptus nutans. It's also listed as threatened, and it is restricted to the west. Well, it's not actually, it's just almost in the park. It's just on the edge of the park on the west side. And it grows on that marine plain substrate also, and has beautiful, obviously, red nodding flowers. It's called the red-flowered mort. And it's only known from two populations at this point in time. So like morts and mallets, unlike other eucalypts, they're killed by fire, they don't resprout, and they have to grow from seedlings. And they take a long time to grow, very slow. So initially you get these stands of eucalypts, you know, which are like the diameter of your thumb. And then over many years, you know, 50 to 100 years, they thin and grow into bigger trees. But they are certainly vulnerable to too frequent fire.
Mm. Another picture of the red mort.
Beautiful. There's another Verticordia crebra, which refers, I think the crebra refers to hidden flowers. And it's same long style and stigma like the other Verticordia we looked at, and this is also restricted to spongylite breakaways, but further inland and mostly around the central part of the park. Okay. I mean, inland is in not coastal, yes, and that's its typical habitat. They're able to grow on these rocky substrates. Virtually nothing else is growing, and yes, it's amazing how they survive the hot summers. But the gravel itself, in theory, does act as like a stone mulch. So, and they obviously benefit from the lack of competition. So they've adapted for this to this harsh environment, which allows them to not be outcompeted by the other shrubs, I suppose.
Oh, just remarkable. Well, thank you very much for that, Sarah. That was just so inspiring. So predominantly you were sharing with us species, I believe, on the western side of the park. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Right. And so just in looking down on the Fitzgerald River National Park in this last 4 minutes or so that we've got, is there any kind of core messages that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, I mean, we're very fortunate. We have such a large park, 350,000. You know, it's one of the larger parks, obviously, in Western Australia. Um, it is, yeah, unique and, you know, just very valuable. It's important to conserve in terms of not introducing dieback to areas that are dieback free. And, you know, there has been a big push in the last 20, 30 years to do that, but it's always a risk. The central area has been closed off, but, you know, managing people is always fraught. Fire management is obviously important. And as you say, we don't want any places to burn too frequently. But there are areas also that I believe that are very long and brown, where some of these proteaceous species do start to senesce and collapse. So it's important not to let them get past the stage where you can burn and get germination. So it's
So it's a
you've got to look
balance.
at both sides, yes, indeed.
Mm,
And then these patches of mallet and mort, they need longer again, you know, as they are very slow
mm.
growing. Um, and obviously, I'm not talking. There's lots of fauna values in the park, but that's not my area of expertise. But they depend on the habitat and the vegetation. So hopefully,
So it's really that sense I remember a long time ago asking Nathan McCoy, what's the Fitzgerald Biosphere teach us? And he said, well, it teaches about connectivity. I would imagine that in so many experiences you've had in the park, you probably see that in so many different ways of thinking about the connectivity between the plants, the geology, the soil types. So much there, the animals. It's an
yeah,
incredible lattice, isn't it?
yeah, and it is amazing just to have that big, large area, you know, that hasn't been chopped up and fragmented. I mean, the drying climate is a huge concern. Certainly over the years, we've seen patches or years where everything has dried out and plants start to die and collapse, and then you get a good year. It looks like they're bouncing back, but you know, this is we don't know what's going to happen in the future. And then if you get fire and then a very dry year, you know, it's going to affect the recruitment after fire. So the changing climate, you know, it's not something we can do anything about. I mean, on ground, but it will be a challenge also. But then, you know, some of these species are amazingly tough, but so there'll probably be winners and losers.
Those bare patches that I can see to the west of the park,
Uh,
I don't understand why they're a different color.
well, yes, I have been looking at them also. That's a 2000. It must be quite an old aerial photo. That I think that's a 2008 fire scar.
Oh, fire scar. But even with those sort of boundary lines all around it.
Yes, because they would be major tracks. Well, that's all I can think of. But Google Earth normally
That's
isn't.
what Nathan thought it was too. Nathan said that.
Yes. Oh, good. Yeah, yeah. It must be quite an old photo, which is surprising. Yeah.
Well,
Um,
really, from what you've taught us about today, and thank you so much for your time, you can really see that more funding is required and more people are required, and so much more to study and so much more to learn, and so many more areas to protect with those species, endemic species that aren't necessarily in the park. But we've learnt a huge amount today. and we can see there's a lot more drawing in front of us in terms of what else we have to now illustrate for the artwork. So we're very, very grateful for your time, and thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome. I look forward to seeing it all come to fruition, and yeah, it's very exciting, very exciting.